You may recall me saying that I like to customize my pen, and that is probably one of the most beneficial things that you can do for yourself when you're setting up your pen tablet. However, functions are one of my favorites because under functions I find ExpressKeys, touch strip, and pop-up menu. And by the way, I did skip over display toggle on purpose because I am going to cover that in a separate section. But these ExpressKeys, touch strips, and pop-up menus I find are absolutely critical to increasing my productivity. And I'm going to show you how right now. Now, I'd like to set these ExpressKeys up for Photoshop specifically. So I'm going to review the process of adding an application as a custom application to which I can assign application-specific settings. So to the right of the application area, I'm going to click on the plus sign. I'm going to select Photoshop by tapping on it and then going ahead and clicking OK. As it's been added, I can then set some of these buttons up for my specific settings in Photoshop. Now, I happen to be using the Cintiq 12WX tablet today. It is one of the interactive pen displays in the Cintiq line, and it does feature a slightly different orientation or number of ExpressKeys than that of, say, for example, the Intuos tablet. As I click on Intuos and then select Functions, you'll see that there are 4 buttons here. On the Cintiq 12WX, I actually have 5 buttons, one of which is set by default for display toggle, but I am going to keep you in suspense for that one and cover that just a little bit later. So what exactly are ExpressKeys? Well, in their simplest explanation, they're hot buttons. They're buttons that can be assigned various keyboard shortcuts. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and set these up for some of the things that I do most often in Photoshop. I'm going to leave these 2 top ones right now for display toggle. Again, we'll cover that a little bit later on. And I'm going to come right here to the far left-hand side and set this up for a particular function. Now, bear in mind that there is a reason why there are 2 separate sections here. You've got, in this case, 5 individual sets of buttons on both sides, or 5 individual buttons, I should say, on both sides of the tablet. So I'm going to set these up for completely different settings on both sides. To the far left, I'm going to set this up for a keystroke, and I'm going to hit the Tab key on my keyboard and click OK. And the Tab key in Photoshop allows me to toggle my palettes, or panels I should say, on and off. So I'll just type this in here, toggle panels, and I will click OK. And then right below that drop-down menu, it'll say exactly what I just named it. This one I'm going to set up for another keystroke, Command-Option-Z or Control-Alt-Z, which allows me to multiply or multiple steps backwards. I like to just say multiple undo. Click OK here. This one right down here I oftentimes leave set to option, but sometimes I'll set it for another modifier, and in that case it would be the Shift key. And the reason why I do that is I'm often making selections with the lasso tool. By holding that Shift key down, I can add to that selection. Then I'll click OK. You may realize that there is also another modifier, Option, when you're using the selection tools. For example, Option is going to subtract from that selection. But what I like to do is set the front button of my pen up for the Option or Alt key, again, if I'm using Windows. So I'm going to leave that one set to Shift and rely on the front button of my pen for the Option or Alt key. This one right down at the bottom will, by default, pan and scroll. And we can do that. Sometimes I find it more beneficial, however, to go to keystroke and hit the space bar on the keyboard. And then when I click OK, I'll just say Hand tool. And by default, the Hand tool will allow me to pan and zoom around my image. And Colin is going to be talking about some of the enhanced features of CS4 and how using the Hand tool is more efficient and more streamlined in CS4. To the right-hand side of the keyboard, I'm going to set up a couple more. I'm going to go to another keystroke on the far right, and I'm going to hit the F key on the keyboard. That's going to allow me to toggle my screen mode. So we'll just toggle or type this in here, screen mode. This one right up at the top, I'm oftentimes making duplicate layers, so I'll go to keystroke and hit Command or Control J, and then type duplicate layer. Right, and right down here I'm creating new layers, so let's hit another one. This is a little bit longer, Command Option Shift N or Control Alt Shift N. We'll type new layer. And then finally, this very bottom one down here, I'm going to set this up for a pop-up menu. And pop-up menu is actually going to be covered in greater detail in a later chapter, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave that at pop-up menu, and again, we'll come back to that and cover it just a little bit later. So again, as you can see here, these express keys are very beneficial because what they're doing is they're taking advantage of your non-dominant hand. For example, as I am right-handed, I'm oftentimes just resting my right hand, my drawing hand, on the tablet, and historically I would have my other hand, my left hand or non-dominant hand, married to the keyboard. But what you'll find is that if you can keep your eyes and hands up front on the tablet, you can work more efficiently because you're staying focused on the image itself. So there is a little bit of rhyme and reason to where I've set these buttons up and which sides I've set them up for. For example, the left-hand side, I've set them up for these particular settings because those are what I'm doing most often. With my non-dominant hand, typically with my thumb, I'm able to toggle my panels on and off, or undo, and unfortunately I do that quite a bit. Shift, again, adding to selections, and the hand tool, being able to pan and zoom around my image very efficiently, allows me to work quicker. On the right-hand side of my tablet, there are functions that I use a little less often. For example, again, creating a duplicate layer or a new layer. And then pop-up menu, which you'll find very beneficial as we cover that just a little bit later on. Finally, again, that display toggle, also very beneficial, and that is something else that does deserve credit in its own chapter, so we're going to go ahead and cover that a little bit later on as well. So let's get out of ExpressKeys and take a look at Touch Strip, and then we'll move on to some of those other options.